Why are internet tech giants overwhelmingly US-based? Very large middle class after World War with purchase access to technology. A lot of cheap land with enough structure where talents can move in and take their risks. Easy access to credit. A country that attracts talents from all of the world. The philosophy of taking risk. Fail quickly and as quick learn from failure to try again. Government subsidies and heavy investments in the army, where corporations take the benefit of the resulting technology and researches of high risk funded by government, and invest in those tech and research after the initial results funded by government succeed and the risk diminished. Large population of young adults. Lacks regulations in many aspects. Other folks have great points on the technical side of things. But we also just don't have such a strong cultural landscape that prevents innovation and improvement. In Greece, the Old Man's Club basically encourages nepotism over merit if a young person wants any chance of progressing in their careers. In Japan, cultural respect to age prevents younger folks from being able to voice disagreement on out-of-date ideas or get promoted past their older peers who are ineffective at their job but have been there longer. Westerners in Japanese business are often used to get past the social faux pas of correcting the boss because we have a different tolerance level to differing opinions and thus don't trigger the same responses as someone who knows better than to try might. When I was friends with my India counterpart on one customer support job, the amount of extra process their bosses put in to handle the most basic issues rendered them ineffective, because they couldn't respond and document the large volume of little issues fast enough to put time into the big issues they needed to handle that would be significantly more business impacting. They were stupidly held to the same standards. I was on top of that. So they were also ragged on for not being as good as me, when he would have been if he followed the same processes and procedures I followed here in America that prioritized documenting only the important information, not every piece of information that existed. When I resolved an issue around a cancellation fee, I only needed to document the reason and the amount refunded, because the rest of the information was on the ticket itself. But he'd be required to list out every single piece of account information in our documentation for some inexplicable reason, taking a 1-minute solve to a 5-minute solve just from all the transcribing required. He was threatened with firing when he asked his boss why there was such a big difference in our responsibilities to do the same thing. A big factor I'm not seeing in the comments is the massive research and university system in the US, which was, and still is, strongly funded by the US government. That system was also early to adopt computer science and engineering. Now, there are many other great universities in other countries, but the sheer amount of research and funding in the US is at a larger scale. For context, the US puts about $74.7 billion of funding into academic R&D. By contrast, the runners-up, China and Germany, only spend about $34 and $24 billion respectively. This is considering more recent numbers, too. So China would not have had the same amount of academic R&D spending back in the 70s, 90s as they do today. https://nsf.gov/pubs/nsb20213/academicard international comparisons. Also connected to this is the sorts of corporate R&D that emerged in the US around and just before that period. Places like Bell Labs pulled top-level researchers in areas like solid-state physics and engineering, leading to top-level research and fast-paced innovation at companies. There's a reason there are a number of Nobel Prize-winning physicists who did their work in Bell Labs. This also connects to the comments explaining the origin of the Internet from DoD research programs. Here's an interesting article which, though motivated by a political policy, does talk about other important factors leading to the fast-paced innovation in the U.S. during that period. https itif.org/publications/2020/11/02/Understanding National System 2020/. All this combined with the industrial economic advantages in the U.S. in the wake of its post-World War II and Cold War hegemony, access to massive silicon deposits, and more larger market incentives due to deregulation made it a hotbed for a massive growth in the tech industry. Because the USA companies have a lot of money to go spend on talent. As the country with the largest GDP, people spend more money on tech here and it makes them very powerful. Also, the U.S. military-fueled Silicon Valley and all the best talent wants to work in Silicon Valley or at least Washington State. Gonna get a lot of hate for this, but lion's share of tech innovation happens in the US. It's not that Americans are inherently anything over other places in the world. It's a feedback loop. Biggest tech companies are in the US. Talent from around the world flock there to work at those tech companies. Creates a huge pool of talent in the area. New tech companies start there from that pool. Access to talent and capital. This snowballed a bit as U.S. tech investment from companies like Xerox and HP led the way for what we have now. What happens in a lot of industries, especially before remote work was common, is that you end up with regions that are specialized in an industry. Even within the U.S., you're going to have a very different talent pool in New Orleans than in San Jose. There are zounds of engineers already in the Bay Area and they may be looking for new opportunities for any number of reasons but don't want to move across the country to join another company. Before the recent wave of layoffs, the thought process in Silicon Valley was you can just walk across the street and get another job if you need to. This draws a ton of talent because the engineers aren't tied to a single company. It also benefits the companies because you have access to the top talent. If you're starting or growing a business, you're more likely to be successful if you have quality people, and you're more likely to have quality people if you're located where those people already live. This isn't just true of tech. Look at finance, fashion, energy, entertainment. Even within technology, some niches have specific locales. For example, the big camera companies are all based in Japan because they pay the most. So those with the skills flock there. In UK, programmers etc. are paid about $3,540k per year average, which is so low you can't even afford a 2-bed apartment. In USA, the top ones from those companies are on $300k minimum. Top talent goes to where the money is. You're getting a lot of wrong answers. It's impossible for Americans to really grasp the why unless they've spent a lot of time overseas, in a position of power or authority. It's impossible for non-Americans to grasp the why unless they've spent a lot of time in the US in the right positions. Innovation doesn't come out of a vacuum. You need a particular set of circumstances, including but not limited to policy, educated workforce, culture, risk appetite, and reward-to-risk ratio. The US is the only country on the planet where all of that exists in one place. Approximately 90% of the world's innovation comes from the US for a reason. Tech is mainly all about risk-taking. In Europe, it's harder to take risks mainly because of countless regulations. The US has the largest population of furries, that's why. The United States has a culture of entrepreneurialism like nowhere else. The US is open for business. Europe hates innovation. It gets in the way of their carefully planned economies. You couldn't invent the iPhone in the EU. You need to wait for someone else to invent it. Then wait for the EU to legislate charger cables. Then you can invent it. https commission.europa.eu/publications/whitepaper Artificial Intelligence European Approach Excellence and True. St. N. The EU had a huge book of law written on AI in 2020 defining what AI was and was not allowed. Before anyone had any idea what was and wasn't possible. If you were an AI startup, would you base yourself in Europe? In addition to what others have said here, it also helps that the internet itself was literally invented in the US. This gave US companies a huge head start in tech. The US has the advantage of scale. The European single market doesn't exist in that way. A Dutch startup will have more trouble expanding across Europe beyond the Netherlands borders. A company from any American state can more easily expand across the entire country, giving them a head start. They used that head start to kill the competition in Europe. There used to be a Dutch kind of MySpace, Facebook called Hives. There still is a Dutch Amazon called Bol. There's a Dutch streaming service called Videoland. None of them ever went international. Also, there used to be space and time for these local companies to grow and compete. Philips didn't invent the light bulb, but they got time and room to grow and become a significant global player. This doesn't happen anymore. They invented the vast majority of the tech for a start. Internet, GPS and cellular technology are all US military inventions. Secondly, in the US, nobody in US government employ can patent an invention. Unless classified, they are all public property. And thirdly, they had to capital available at the right time to take advantage of new tech coming online. Because they are able to pay more to people who work for them, and the people will obviously go to the one who offers more in exchange for their time and talent. Land of opportunity. The United States invented the Internet, cf. DARPANET, and US students reaped the benefit of being online, having access to early complete in the early 90s to later form companies. From my understanding, it's a lot easier for people to start companies in the US versus anywhere in the world. You know, these big companies buy up small companies too. The majority of those companies are from Silicon Valley. There is a reason California is the second largest economy in the world, and it's not our agricultural industry or Hollywood. The tech talent in the San Francisco Bay Area is unmatched. I've lived in multiple countries and I've never experienced anything at this level. It attracts the best and brightest from around the world. The people who built those companies came from all over the world. It's the environment to grow in California and the other people they met at their level.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. iFoegot is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.